Right now, I want to welcome to the program from the Daily Caller, Mr. Matthew Boyle. How you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing well, Cam. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks very much for coming on the show tonight, and some interesting developments in Fast and Furious, not from the testimony of Attorney General Eric Holder, but from the words of the former head of the DEA office in Tucson, Arizona, Tony Colson. You talked to him earlier this week, and he says that if Attorney General Eric Holder did not know about Fast and Furious, it was only because he did not want to know.
Exactly. What he's saying, what he told me is and you know, it's interesting that we're starting to see more and more people come out and talk about this on the record and publicly, not only the press but also the congressional investigators. But what he told me is that it was widely common knowledge that guns were walking during Operation Fast and Furious among all sorts of different law enforcement agents throughout the region, all the way up to Main Justice. You know, it was common knowledge. It was widely known. Whether they knew the operation was called Operation Fast and Furious or not is irrelevant.
Right.
They knew guns were walking. They knew the practice was in place. And what he says is that if the Attorney General really didn't know that guns weren't walking, that it would have been an active decision on the Attorney General's part not to know. The way that I liken that to, something that I compare it to, is that I'm not married, but if I were, and I knew my wife was cheating on me, I would choose not to come home at a certain hour because I knew I would know what I would find. I mean, that's what we've got here. I mean, the Attorney General knew what was going on, or at least didn't want to know what was going on.
Interesting. Now, he says, Tony Colson does, the head of the DEA Tucson office, while Fast and Furious was going on. He said at the time that this was taking place, ATF's boss, Bill Newell, was the face and the voice of ATF. If you go back during that time, he's the one who's on every major national news station. He's talking about weapons in Mexico. You know, he was the voice of ATF. I mean, he was driving ATF's policy. There was very little oversight at the time from anyone on what was going on. I became aware of it because ICE interceded on more than one occasion to seize weapons at the port of entry that ATF was trying to walk into Mexico. Now, ICE, as you point out, falls under DHS, which begs the question, why was apparently there no why was Janet Napolitano not informed? Was she informed? Eric Holder says he never had any contact with Hillary Clinton or Napolitano on Fast and Furious. But again, if you've got ICE agents that are interdicting guns that are, you know, moving south as part of an ATF operation, you can't tell me that higher ups aren't going to be having conversations about this.
Exactly. I mean, that is a major development in this as well. Is that the DEA falls under the Justice Department,
right?
So, and of course, and you would figure that the DEA finds out about it from ATF guys, other DOJ guys, right? Well, no, this guy finds out about it from his friends in Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which falls under Homeland Security, which begs the question. Now, by the way, and what's going on here, and this is very common practice with different law enforcement agencies, because they all have different targets and different agendas and different things that they're going after. So Immigration and Customs Enforcement is after one thing, ATF is after another, FBI is after something else, and they all kind of they rub up against each other. They go into conflict, and the way that that's resolved, there's a couple ways that that's resolved. First off, it's the first place it would be resolved is through the U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona, which would be Dennis Burke, who's already resigned.
Yeah.
The other way that this could be resolved, and it's unclear if either or both of these situations happened as a result of these conflicts, but the other way that this could be resolved is through a meeting between the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Attorney General of the United States, which would be Janet Napolitano, Mrs. Big Sis, and Mr. Holder. So, and that's something that as this develops, these questions are probably going to be asked of the Attorney General and of Mrs. Napolitano.
Yeah. Now, he went on to say as well, Tony Colson did, in talking to you, he said, if someone brings something to your attention and not really all of the facts are brought to your attention, we're sending guns into Mexico. If he, Holder, chooses not to ask the next question and then makes a statement, I didn't know about that then, but did find out about it when it became a hot topic issue, when he decided, well, I should ask that next question now. Are you really walking guns into Mexico? That leads to the next question, which is, are the Mexicans seizing recovering those weapons before they're used in a crime? The answer is no. And he said, with that widespread knowledge, there's no way that people in D.C. at ATF headquarters and at DOJ did not know what was going on. Now, it's important that he says he doesn't have firsthand knowledge of this, but just speaking practically, Colson says...
Practically, as a law enforcement agent and as a member of leadership in one of those law enforcement agencies down there in another city. Now, remember, Fast and Furious was run out of Phoenix. This guy's based in Tucson. He's leading an agency's office out of another city in the same state that is then the agency is, according to Holder and this administration, had nothing to do with Fast and Furious, but he knows about it. He knows about the conflicts between ICE and ATF. He knows about all of these different things, and he's in another city. So, I mean, basically what he's doing is he's speaking from a practical law enforcement standpoint, from somebody who was in the situation at the time. And there's a good chance that this guy will probably be talking to Congress pretty soon about this as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, Matthew, do you think that we've talked with folks on the House Oversight Committee, including Representative Issa. It's pretty clear that this is not over. I know that Eric Holder, seemed to be very dismissive, advancing this line the last time he was before the House Oversight Committee. This is the 6th time I've testified before Congress. Really not much more I can say. But clearly there is a lot more that is left to be uncovered. Where do you think this goes next in terms of the congressional investigation?
Well, there's a few places it's going to go next. It's still going to continue on the road of what did the Attorney General and his colleagues inside the Justice Department leadership know, and when did they know it? On the morning of the hearing, there was a report released by the Congressional Republicans on the Oversight Committee that shows that Laney Brewer called gun walking in Fast and Furious a quote terrific idea back in 2009, and according to Congressman Trey Gowdy of South Carolina, Democratic Oversight Committee members' report that claims that nobody in Justice leadership knew about gun walking or Fast and Furious is, quote, demonstrably false. He told me that right after the hearing.
Right.
And the thing is, that's one way where this is going to go. Another way where this is going to go is I think what you're going to see is it's going to go over. So how do the different law enforcement agencies deconflict with each other? That's what deconflict is, a term that they use to solve different disputes that arise between different law enforcement agencies, and especially when they're under two different departments, such as the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. There's a good chance that shot all the way up to leadership in Washington. Maybe not the Attorney General's office, but people very close to him, and maybe not the Secretary of Homeland Security's office, but people very close to her too. So how was that? Were those conflicts resolved? Who knew about what and when? How, why, and that's where this is going to go. And then the other thing is that there still hasn't been any accountability, and I think that's a major thing that you're seeing out of congressional Republicans. And even though there wasn't a ton of information that came out of the Attorney General's appearance before the Oversight Committee, one thing is very clear. Members of Congress, at least the Republicans, want to see accountability, want to see somebody held accountable. Somebody has to be fired. Somebody has to resign. Somebody has to be held accountable for the lost lives because of these failed administration policies. And at this point, where you're seeing from the administration is a continued deflection. And yes, of course, the Attorney General would like this to be over. Of course, the Democrats would like this to be over. Why? Because this is a major scandal. I mean, this is something that they can't defend. They cannot defend walking guns into Mexico. It's just an indefensible policy, and they've admitted as such.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of where this is going to go. I mean, what you're going to have to see is there's going to have to be a proof that there's a political will there. I can tell you this, that Speaker John Boehner hasn't had the back of those who have called for Holder's resignation, so we'll have to see where he stands on that issue. His spokesman won't answer those questions. He hasn't for months with me. So that's one thing, that there's going to have to be political will there in Washington to make sure that somebody is held accountable for this, and that's where it's going to go is accountability. Different law enforcement agencies, deconfliction practices, and also still along the lines of how much more, as more information is squeezed out of the Justice Department, and hopefully eventually maybe they'll start complying with lawfully issued congressional subpoenas.
All right. Well, listen, Matthew, thanks very much, sir, for coming on the program this evening. Good catching up with you, and hope we can do it again soon.
All right, thanks, Kim.